All right, welcome to a very exciting Gray Pages. We're doing a kind of a ladies takeover here today. So we've got all of the wives here, and so we've got so Bree Linderman, Lance's wife, Chelsea, Joel's wife, Cheryl, Hugh's wife, and Lindsey, Taylor's wife. And we get asked all the time about life, marriage, motherhood, and there's a lot of times it's a bunch of dudes talking on this show. And I'm very excited about this episode. Thank you all for making time to be here. First of all, thank you for the lives you've lived and the model that you've been. But I'm really excited for you to be able to share some of your own stories today. And so I guess I want to do this as both by way of introduction. So you can kind of each, if in turn, if you would like to kind of introduce yourself a little bit to those listening, but also maybe orienting this around your own. So introduction to you, but not as wife of, but we're not just I know you're not just attached to a missionary apostolic dude, right? But that you all have been deeply engaged in the life and the work. And so your own kind of heart and mission in the work, and then maybe just a little bit about yourself. I think that'd be good if we could just do a little round and kind of get a sketch of everybody, and then we'll just kind of go from there. We'll see what unfolds. Maybe I'll just call on you, or I don't know how to do this. So how about we'll start with the studio. Linz, if you want to kick us off, and then Bree, and then Chelsea, and then we'll kind of wrap from there.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. It's good to have the girls. Yeah,
So
I'm
excited
Lindsey,
about it.
and um, yeah, it's an honor to get to do it. And I think there's a lot of things I'm really excited to talk about. And I was just telling Cheryl, it's fun. I like hearing women's perspective, just their real journeys in life. And
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of questions, and a lot of times, our husbands are kind of the ones out in front. We're not really used to doing this. This is not really our thing behind the microphone or on the stage or even writing. But I think there's a lot of deep wisdom that these ladies have that I've really learned a
Mhm.
lot from. So yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful, and I'm glad to hear about just the journey of what is it to be like a Christ follower and have my own call personally, and then how that incorporates into family and mission together to this greater call. And then specifically like an apostolic leader, it does look a little different than just some of the other, needed parts of the body. So yeah, I'm excited to hear y'all's thoughts and gain wisdom from what the Lord has done in your life. So
Love it. You wanna jump in? You guys want to make a round of introductions?
yeah, sure. Cheryl.
I'm Cheryl. Again, not gonna lie and say I'm excited to be doing this with everybody. This is the thing I hate the most. Hugh
Mhm.
is the front guy and the guy that gets out and speaks and does everything, and it's just not where I'm comfortable. And I joked about it with my kids today because words, I have a lot. Like I can talk forever. But when I have to talk, or I feel like, something like in a format like this,
Yeah.
I just don't. But um as being one of the older seasoned members of this group, I do feel like there is a lot of life lived and maybe some wisdom that I can pass on. And Hugh and I have always done ministry different just because of our family, and that may come up later or may not, but I feel like I can give women another perspective. Is, like Taylor and Lindsey do so much ministry together and it's awesome. But Hugh and I generally don't do any ministry together because mine was always, at home with Ryan and the kids. And my passion is horses. So most of my ministry is focused around the horses and horse therapy and stuff like that. And he's out in front of everybody doing his thing.
Love it. Thank you. What we say? Did we say Bree? Yeah, let's do that.
I'm Bree. I'm like the classic introduction here. Yeah, well, first of all, too, I'm just stoked to be here. And look forward to the conversation ahead of us, and especially look forward to gaining some perspective and wisdom and all that, and just chatting because it's fun. But yeah, I'm out here in Peoria, Arizona. I am I'd say newer to this kind of journey and kind of what we're doing out here. My husband Lance and I have been doing this for maybe like, it was like 8 years, as far as like when we first started our very first kind of missionary and business and all of that stuff. So we are well, I'll just speak for myself. I love my passion is my kids and other kids and working with youth. And I just love connecting and that deep relationship that comes with that. And I've been working on my newest thing that I'm working on right now is a hybrid homeschool, and really just pouring into the kids that in our community. And I volunteer in the youth group. I love being around kids. Aside from that, I work as a nurse, and that's like my professional job. I think some of that pours into this area, the more nurturing and caring side of that. And I've been very surprised to see how my nursing experience and expertise kind of comes into these other areas and the opportunities that I've had and that have been opened up through that. So it's been good for me. Yeah. What else? Anything else?
That's great. That's great. They're get us started.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm Chelsea, and Joel and I have been married and lived in Aliquippa now for 18 years. I can relate to you, Cheryl. I am just accustomed to letting Joel be in front with his words. So I appreciate that he does that. I enjoy being more behind the scenes, but our life together here, over the years, we've done just a lot of different things together related to mission as a family, serving youth and families in our community, what that's looked like. I think, I'm excited today because for our conversation, I think for the four of us here, I hope that we can each share just really different perspectives. On one hand, I think we've all had some just similar journeys with the Lord and what that's looked like for our families. But I think there's some really unique things that each of us have experienced and are experiencing and what that's looked like for our families. And I think that's going to be just really beautiful to get to share and have a conversation about today. So, have 3 kids, and I am a counselor. And so that's what my life has looked like professionally, but just love just being able to use that in our work in the community as well. So, yep.
I love this. Thank you all for sharing and getting us kind of kicked off. And by the way, we don't need to constantly bounce to me as much as you all want to just engage as you hear from each other. Feel free. But to kind of keep us going, and we don't also need to do kind of a round robin each time. So just respond as you kind of feel like. So I'll just put questions to the group. But one of the things that I heard as you all were talking, there was a theme a little bit of a little more there was kind of the, he's up front with his words or behind the scenes, or I'm more used to that, or we're not the ones that are typically doing that. That makes perfect sense. But knowing all of these guys, I can't tell you how many times I have thought and not even just wondered or thought, but been explicitly I know that this is from your wives, the wisdom or the insights or the things that the lessons learned are coming from conversations with you all. And I'm just curious, about this role. So the framing of mission as family, the kind of being comfortable going, look, he can go out and say these things, but also knowing I don't know. I'm just curious, like how you guys think about um, the role of leadership that you take on in the family, and including with these guys that you're putting up with, and leading many of the times. And I'm just like, I don't know if any of you kind of could speak to that kind of like place of authority and leadership that you feel like, yeah, I'm not up front, but I know I am investing heavily in what's kind of coming out of this family.
Yeah, I can share. I think working together and knowing our place is huge, and leadership is, it looks different in every circumstance. You know, if we have a trauma going on with our kids, you're going to be better. Like one person's going to be better. They're going to step up, rise to the occasion, depending on what the situation is, you know. I've got a single woman that's at the door. I'm going to go to the door. You know, if it's a man, it's you know, it's going to be different all the time. So I think women a lot of times can get kind of like pigeonholed into thinking that one is not as valuable or as another role. And as the body of Christ, I think we've all seen that the person talking is like needs to be supported, and that's important that they feel like empowered to be like, no, you should share. You were given this gift and you can articulate things really well, and you can connect and you understand people's stories to know what connects. But if everyone's coming over and, you know, I'm the one that's going to be sure we've got food, that everyone has what they need. And I like that role. I'm not, you know, I'm not like, oh, I have to cook, you know, like I think kind of knowing who we are in the family, knowing our particular call and not disdaining that call is really, really important. So I think it's great to have that role. And I think we all know that there has to be strength from some stability, because I think it's our husbands have some, I mean, definitely for Taylor and Hugh, like I know the call can just be wild sometimes. It's like unprecedented. We don't know all the time. Yeah, we never know what's gonna happen. So I think there's a stability that we know that we have to offer. And we like holding that. We like holding that piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that, Lindsay. I think along with the stability piece, there's such a need for like flexibility. It's like, how do you integrate both? How are we bringing some stability to the call and what's going on, but also how is there flexibility to change at the last minute, right? Or to pivot to what's happening next, and to the new thing that's happening just in ministry and in calling. And ministry can be really unpredictable, right? With who is showing up or who's in need or what's happening. And it is such a balance of providing that stability in our homes and for our families, and at the same time saying, oh, we have to pivot tonight, something came up, right? And so what does that look like to balance both? Because both are needed, right?
So I'm curious around this like flexibility piece. You're giving like an example in an evening, which seems like really important. But you know, even to the call can be wild. That like seemed to really resonate, and like at all times. And so like even in the like circumstances of y'all's lives, there's been like places you've lived, moves that you've made, like not just like, oh, we were flexible with tonight's plans, but we've been flexible. From what I could tell, you've been flexible with where you live, how you live, where like the I guess just talk a little bit about the like what has been the journey over time of this kind of like so like a fixed stability in a relationship, but then the flexibility in the journey or something like that.
I think for us, learned really early on the importance of the flexibility, but also boundaries. When Hugh and I first started planning churches, it was common that the pastor's wife had to be at everything. And had told Lindsey this story. There was one time when Ryan was having a lot of seizures, but it was Sunday morning and we were planning a church and I had to be there. So I was literally carrying him across the driveway to my neighbor's house to dump him on her couch because I had to get to church. And I got halfway across and I was just like, it was like the Lord just, just really spoke to me and it was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? And I literally turned around, took him back, laid him on the couch, called Hugh, and said, I will not be at church today. I don't know if I'll ever be at church again. And he about died because Hugh Halter, he really cares about people and cares what people think. And I do not. I'm just like, from that day on, I was like, yep, nope, no more of that. Like, and so to know that when we're on this journey, there is the flexibility of opening the door and serving that woman, at the door, whoever it is. But also and for like Hugh and I'm the one that brings the boundaries. I'm the one that says, if you need to go do that, but I won't be there. I'm going to be here with our kids, taking care of everybody. We used to host parties all the time and everybody would be in our house and it would be 9 o'clock and I'd had a really tough day with Ryan and I'd be like, peace out. And the people just got to know I'd be gone. I'd go to bed and I would, tell them lock up, clean up but so that balance.
Yeah.
Women have to know that it's okay. It's okay to say no. It's okay to not show up at everything and just be real and honest about that.
How does that land for y'all?
Really good. And I think that keyword like balance is huge. And that comes like, for me, I'm like, that's something that we are constantly like, just like talking about in our marriage, our family. And I am kind of like the temperature gauge of the family, like of our home, and Lance is out there. He's a temperature gauge of everything else, outside of our our walls that we have going on. And we're constantly just like tapping in, like, we're like, okay, like, where's this at? Where's that at? Like good communication to really, sense what our next steps are. And I think boundaries are super important and, they're hard. They're hard to navigate. Like, I think because the calling is to give and give and give. And to know where you're like, okay, like this is where I'm at right now. Just really sensing that. And I think my piece in this, for Lance and I, like most of us we're like we're keeping things going at home and we're scheduling, like Lance just mentioned the other day, he's like, I don't think I've ever been to a kid's dentist appointment or doctor's appointment, or like I haven't had to think about like the schedule, and like how things like fit in and all these things. I'm like, it's good for me to hear that. And
I think you run the risk of, and you've seen it in church leadership over time, of such burnout and just falling away from the Lord, because if you have that mentality, like that we have to give and give and give and give and give, which we do because that's how we are, versus I used to, when things would get really crazy, because I'm the one that just is, can be a little over the edge sometimes. And I would look at Hugh and I'd go, what in the world is the Lord going to do without you? Just that whole, how in the world is he going to manage? And just that mentality of reminding ourselves
That's good.
he does not need us to, go and go and go and go and give and give. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that stuff, but he does not need us. Like I think sometimes feel so much more important than we really are, that we need to do that or the Lord's going to fall apart. And just a reminder that if you're not, if you don't somehow find that sense of humor and that balance, then you're going to fall apart and you're not going to be able to do this longevity.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I mean, ultimately, we have to make it to the end, right? I mean, that's our call. It's like run the race and be faithful. And, we might be 90 and we've got to make it to 90, or we might be 45, we don't know how many days we have, but I think we have to be faithful with what we're given. And if we're running at a pace that's not sustainable for us or our family. It's not going to work. But at the same time, always asking God, and I see you guys doing this, and always asking God to give us more capacity and give us what we need. Like I don't have the capacity to do these hard tasks. I mean, I find myself always doing things that I've never done before, like whether it's in accounting or business or just trying to, do commercial property or youth development or something. And I'm like, oh, I have no idea how to do that. It's always new. It's always something very new. But I'm like, the Lord knows how to do that, so he has to give me that. Or if I'm going to take in these children that are not my children and try to love them, then he's got to give me the ability to do that. And I have to be, on my knees asking him for that. Like, if you're going to ask me to do this, you're going to, like, I need you to increase that capacity. I need you to prepare our family, I need you to provide. And he does. He's been faithful. But I think what makes us make it, I mean, laughter is for sure a huge thing. Like, we have to be able to laugh and have joy and understand like what's life-giving to us. We have to be able to love the call and not resent the call. I think that's a huge thing, is if we get ourselves in a place where we're resentful of people or, then we're not very faithful servants if we're like reluctant to do it. He doesn't need us to do it. We get to do it. So let's enjoy the call. And what do we have to do to make us enjoy it? Those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and then like kind of embed in our family. Like, this is the way we live, and what God's asked us to do, and this is the joy that he's given, and this is what we're doing. I think that's probably one of the bigger things is I have to remind myself, okay, what are we doing again? Like, what's the goal here? Because it can get with all the details, and especially having a husband that always has ideas and dreams, and for me to be able to like empower those things. And sometimes I don't do well. Sometimes I kind of crush them with my practical realities. So I have to learn not to do that. But learning like, okay, what's our goal? What are we after? And then reminding myself first, like this is what's set before us, and then how can these pieces fit together to accomplish that mission?
Yeah.
I think it's worth pointing out though, like because as you talk about like, there's a lot of like, we really hold things together kind of in the home and the relationship. I think you used Bree said like a temperature gauge or whatever, picture like a thermostat or something, but like, so there's a lot of like attention paid there. And then there's also this implied support of the work going on with your husbands. But also like, I'm also like aware you guys are like, oh, you're launching a school and you're running an equine therapy. Like, you've got your own kind of businesses and initiatives and things that you're pouring into. On top of all of like, in addition to all of this, I'm curious like about those projects, those like personal kind of projects that you're building, because you've got your own like initiative and mission and things you're pouring into, and then how you just as missionary balance like, here's the work. Because I know like for all of us, we feel that like tug back and forth where it's like you could give yourself wholly to this thing. I think this is maybe around this conversation of boundaries and longevity. Like there's so many plates you all are spinning. How do you stay sane with that and balance like the showing up to get the work done? But that's like apart from or aside from the issue with what's going on in the home, or even the other projects that your spouses are working on.
Are you gonna do something, Chelsea? I feel like you're good at
yeah, I mean, for me, I've always had like the mental and emotional health job that's been kind of separate from our like work and mission that we've done in Aliquippa. And I think there's been a piece of that that's been really just healthy and good for me, and am I always having to tap into that to say, what's the balance here, right? And how is this balancing out with family life, with, life on mission and all of that. Yes, of course, I think just like anyone else would be, I think I'm having to tap into what that looks like. But I actually think it's been a really healthy balance for me to have that other piece of my life that is a little bit separate, that I'm really passionate about, that is actually for me very quiet, and that the nature of the job itself, right, that is very private and I can't talk a lot about, right? It's very sacred and personal to the people that I'm working with. And so I think for me, yes, it's a constant balancing act. And there are seasons of asking myself, does this need to be adjusted, right? Is our family life busier in the season? Do I need to make adjustments here? Yes, it's constant evaluation and rebalancing act, and I think in all of this, things are constantly moving and shifting, just because I've said yes or no to something in one season does not mean I'm saying yes or no to something in another season, right? And so now I've lost your question, John, but kind of hopefully I answered your question.
Okay.
Yes, constantly kind of balancing. I have kind of always had this kind of separate piece. Sometimes there's been more overlap into what's happening, in our lives in Aliquippa, and sometimes it's very distinct. So, yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
I have a question, I guess, for you guys. Where do you feel like you draw strength from, like as a woman? Is there like someone in your life that's you look to regularly, or someone that's just inspiring? Yeah, I'd love to hear like routines people do, or like how do you remind yourself of what you're called to, or even as a mom, or just where do you ladies draw strength from?
I know for me that was, and it took me a long time to figure it out, but one of the hardest things about this life in missional ministry, especially with all the moving that we've done, was that grieving and that sadness over not having a group of really close, strong women friends, because everywhere we would go and I'd have that friend group and then we'd move again. And so, that was something that was really hard for me, because I, see other of my friends that have lived in the same place forever and they've got their group of women and they all do everything together. So years ago, I reached out to the women that had been like the closest in my lives as my friends. And I didn't even ask them. I just told them, because that's how I roll, that they were going to be my prayer support from here on out. And so I put them all in a group text, and they're like my lifeline. So anything that we're going through, anything that I need prayer for my family or other people, I reach out to them, because I don't have them here with me. So but I needed women in my life that could be supportive on this journey.
That's awesome.
I think I have 5 brothers and sisters, big family. And my mom is like huge for me. She's always available and just speaks a lot of truth, wisdom, and the hard truth and the loving truth to me when I need it. So she's a huge support for me. I do have deep friendships and I feel like you, Cheryl, I'm like, a lot of times it's through text communication and that kind of stuff that we are just throwing things out there, and it can be small things or big things, but we're basically a prayer group for each other and others. And it's just space that I can just be myself and be very vulnerable, and I know that they're going to love me through it, or be there right beside me, holding me up. They're kind of my go-to for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think for me over the years, it's looked different. Sometimes it's been relationships with other women that we are in, just ministry with or that are serving alongside of us. And sometimes it's been just intentional contact with some long time friends that are not nearby at all, and just being really intentional to stay in contact with some people that, maybe living really different lives, but that are just really supportive and understanding.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing for us to draw strength from people, because I think that's the nature of this call too, is to be strong for a lot of people, to be strong for our own children. Um, I always look for strength in people. Like if I ever see like an older person, I always ask them, "What have you learned?" So like probably to an annoying point where they're like, but I just want to know, like as you get older, you've gone through so many things and you've like gained these little truths, I think about, like grandmothers and the Native American culture and just the wisdom that they had and just these little remarks that they would make because they thought about these things for years, and yeah, I think it's just a huge thing to be able to ask the Lord, show me the wisdom that you have so that I can impart it, and like it could kind of undergird like our family and know that this is a call to be strong, because if we're being looked to for strength for other people, but we have none. And there's a lot of times where we have none. Our husbands don't have any. Right. Sometimes you think they do. They sound very confident on the I'll like listen to the podcast. I'm like, oh, that sounds good, because that's not what he was conveying this morning, So they're not always strong. And they're not supposed to be. And I think that's what, they're just people.
I'm always like, hey, I heard you say that. Could you try doing it?
Yeah.
Hey.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great.
So
Lindsay, do you have a specific answer to that? I think it was a really good question, but is there someone that you specifically look to or draw strength from, or a source that for you to be reminded?
I mean, I look everywhere for it, like my grandmother is definitely someone who I always look to, and I call her. It's funny because she always is like, "Thanks for calling and checking on me," and I'm kind of like, "Oh, it's kind of for me," I feel kind of bad because I just love she just has this quiet strength, and she's always like, she's a sweet Southern woman, and she's always like, "It's gonna be okay, you hear?" And she always tells me that, like, and I know that she's been through some really hard things, and she's like, "We just got to keep going until our time is done." So when she tells me that, I'm like, okay, then we can face this hard thing that we're dealing with. But yeah, I think just everywhere. I love hearing women who are strong in prayer, even hearing from your daughters, a text that you sent them that they should share with me or something, just like, "Hey, I'm praying for you. I see you." And I think that's what I want to know is, does anyone see what I do? Because as a mother, actually was just walked into the post where Cheryl and I are, and one of our good friends, Kristen, is scraping the windows for that. We're starting a pizza restaurant upstairs, and there's some old garage doors that windows are old and need to be scraped. And so she's scraping this paint off the window, and she was like, "I love this." And she said, "I love it because I can see the progress that I'm making." And I was like, "I know what you're talking about. That's why I like accounting. Like I can see things being done. That's why I like to caulk and when I paint because it like physically makes it look better." And all of our jobs are very undone all the time. Like you do laundry, there's more laundry. You clean, they get home and then it's not clean anymore. Like nothing is ever finished. And I long for just to be seen and be like somebody to hold my hands and be like, "You're doing a good job. You're taking your kids to the dentist, Bree." And that is not easy, like you have to think about their teeth, you have to think about every part of their body, and like you have to, nurture their hearts when they're sad, and navigate the fights of why did you say that to your sister, like all the things is just kind of constant So I think, you know, if we're not doing that for ourselves, or, you know, we can just kind of get lost, and then we are just to that point where we're done. And, you know, I think I see some women do that too, just like, I'm done with all of this. And that is also really hard, because it's like, then you forget the calling. You're not productive, you know. It's like, you know, sin that easily entangles us, you know, and we kind of are like out, you know, like we're out of the game because we haven't taken care of those things. So yes, I just look for strength from everyone, you know, like I know you do that with horses, you know, like, I mean, I think I see strength in everything, nature all the time. There's people I love to listen to. There's a woman that I went to Tanzania years ago, and she was just so inspiring. She had very little, and she was so grateful. And I don't know, I just saw the strength, and there'll never be a book about her or a movie or anything. But I was just kind of like, if I could be strong like her, like she knows what she's doing, you know, and she's not afraid, you know, she's not afraid of poverty. She's not afraid of death, you know, like just strength in people. And I can like borrow that in times of despair. And the Lord kind of shows, you know, lean on this.
So good. That's so good. I think all of us can really resonate with the idea of like even beyond the laundry, but like the missional work never being kind of like it's finished. It's just like so ongoing journey, which is amazing. But then it's like mowed the yard, there it is, or laid this tile there. It's just like those kind of things that you can finish. It's such a good insight. So I want to ask you all about, well, a couple things. So I'm curious around like, so sometimes it's good in like just sharing with folks from other, you know, that in similar kind of lifestyle to go like these kind of like, you talked about the importance of humor and laughter. And sometimes I think it's like, I like the sharing of like war stories a little bit, especially like the absurd, funny ones. And particularly if they make your husbands look ridiculous, they'd be particularly interesting. But like, I'm just curious if you like crazy stories from y'all's like life in general. Just like I just like to take a minute and kind of just like anecdotally maybe hear like what comes to mind of just like these ridiculous lives that you've lived, but then ridiculous to you in the ridiculous space that you've lived in, if anything comes to mind.
Our chance. This is our big chance, girls.
You guys all just edited like 6 stories. Those are the ones I want.
Yeah, we're going to share and then we're going to make you edit them out.
Can this be like a truce of not causing a marital fight later?
We're all going to text our husbands first.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of like just a few weeks ago when my husband called me and he's like, I'm going to drive to Florida like 2 or 3 days from now. I'm going to drive from Phoenix to Florida to pick up a friend and some comics and then drive to Alton and Kansas City. I'm like, this is just like, I feel like we've been like conditioned. Like, it's just crazy all the time. And I'm like, I call my friends. I have a group of friends that we're all nurses, and we share the trauma bond of nursing school. We just like are always like catching up on life and stuff. And I'm like, they're like, every time we see you, like, it's just the most random stuff. I don't even know how to describe it. You guys are just like the most random, spontaneous. I don't know. So I'm like, as far as a war story goes, yeah, that's hard.
Well, they don't have to be war. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm like the craziness.
I was thinking about how, when Joel and I first got married and we were much younger. And so we lived in this very small row house in our community, and we just didn't have a lot of space, but we were kind of in charge of our local church community youth group. And there really weren't many kids from the actual church that were in the youth group. And so we just kind of started rallying kids from our community to attend. But that meant that we decided to hold youth group in our very small like row house, which was really just like a very small living room space and kitchen space. I mean, this was ridiculous, right? That we would have a bunch of teenagers in our like house, and that we were going to do small groups, like break out into small groups in the rest of our house, like in our bedroom. We were newly married, in our bedroom and all the bedrooms of this house. Like, it was just kind of random. And we had, I think, just one other person from college that was here that had graduated with us, that was helping us. But kind of the crazy that season of life was that we literally every week had to kind of transform the first floor of our house to make room. We had also, newly married, didn't understand like the size of furniture. We had bought furniture for that house that was way too big for the living room. And kind of every week we had to like move out a lot of the furniture from the first floor to, like, I don't know, the second or third floor to make room for these kids, right? And they all just kind of came from the street. We would move furniture up to different parts of the house so that there was like room for the kids. We would make crock pots of, whatever cheese dip that the kids would eat. And we kind of just did this every week. It was a lot of work. And then that first floor of the house would just fill with kids. It was chaotic. We would meet, for these small groups. And we did it for quite a bit of time. There's some crazy stories that came out of that. But yeah, it's just total chaos having to put our house kind of back together at the end of, every Sunday night youth group. And now, I'm like, why were we doing this? This is ridiculous that we were kind of transforming like our very small space in that way. But, some of those kids that were in our home, on those Sunday nights, like I think about some of those kids, and we're still in contact with some of them. And those are like some really just fond and close relationships. Those kids actually, they weren't that many years even younger than us, and so they're adults now. And yeah, so I don't know if that's like a war story, but it's one of those things that we kind of do look back and chuckle at and are like, what were we thinking or doing? But in early days of ministry, you just kind of, I don't know, you just did stuff to make it work, right?
One of the things I really love about that story, I mean, like you're saying, like these relationships that have grown out of that, and maybe you're like, oh, I don't know that I would do it that way if we did it today, but like, what were we doing, or question that young self. But then also, like, there's a real way in which I think like you all became who you are by doing that in a very real way too.
Sure.
Right. It's like in the doing of that, our relationship was shaped, our ethos was shaped, our like beyond,
Yeah.
and the relationships, our relationship. And no, thanks for sharing that. It was great.
Yeah.
Any others come to mind here? I've got a few other questions for y'all if you don't, but I wanted to leave some space for the story sharing.
Yeah. I know there's a lot about Hugh. I feel like I could tell a few, but I'll let you do that.
Do it.
There's a lot of Hugh stories.
You can tell them too.
I think something about Taylor that I love and that I'm like, oh my goodness, sometimes is that he has like such a big heart for people, and he likes to like make it. He's very decisive. I'm very indecisive. So he'll like make a call and I'll be like, wait, what? Like, what are we doing? Like he'll say like, a while back, he would be like, we got a team of 15 people coming over for dinner and it's like 4:30. And I'm like, tonight? And he's like, yeah, can we do that? I'm like, well, I'm only making dinner for, 7 or however many, So there's been multiple times where I feel like the Lord actually multiplied our food, knowing that all these people are coming. But I don't know, we get ourselves into wild situations with especially just bringing people in. And I think just a love for the poor. And I think anytime people show, like we meet someone and sometimes it's just totally random, like they just find us. I don't know, like especially Taylor, like he's just walking and he's kind of like, I'm not looking for any of these things. And then he'll meet this guy and he'll say, do you have any work or money, in any ways. And then he'll end up bringing him home for dinner, and, it'll kind of turn into this whole thing. And our family is very much like, we really want to know people and know their story. So if somebody's there, we're going to like grill them with questions. And especially me. I think that all the kids know. I was taking a boy home the other day. He was like, Miss Lindsey, I know you're about to ask me a bunch of questions. I was like, well, this is my time with you, and I'm going to get to know your story and what's going on. But we've definitely had some crazy moments, and I wonder, how our kids will turn out. Sometimes I'm like, maybe this is something they're going to talk to a psychologist about later on in life, sitting on someone's couch of like, we had this person come in, and I don't know, my oldest son, Jude, I know he's had to deal with, a friend that was a recovering alcoholic, and he knew how to like help pick him up and, situate him. Like he knew what to do. He's like, I got this, he did this, or, even talking about like when they talk about drugs at school, Jude's like, oh, I know that one because this guy did that one. Like he knows that he doesn't want to do that because he sees these people, and I mean, not like from his friends, like, you should try this. He's like, oh no, you lose your teeth on that one. It's not good. Familiar with it from this other perspective of like, oh no, we had a guy, stay with us for this time. So I think, but I think a lot of that stems from Taylor taking on these things, and then we look back and we're like, is this something we can handle? But I love his heart for that, and I've like joined in way more later, but I was always not super encouraging in the beginning, or my first reaction usually is not the best, and then I have to like go get my game face on and be like, I can do this. And then it gets better, and the Lord provides, but definitely gets us in some crazy situations.
And I don't have a game face, so
yeah,
my initial reaction is stay there. It's like, what?
Yeah.
No game face, sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, it's really nice to know. Like, I feel like this is like the bond between us. It's just like this, like, it is a crazy lifestyle. It's this pick up and go, like, be ready at any time. You don't know what tomorrow holds. Like, the kids are in on it. Like, we bring our kids on a lot of our adventures, and it's such a beautiful way to live life. And I do love, for me as a mom, I love that for my kids. I love them to have that just real life experience, and to know, where we put our trust and our faith, and this day-to-day adventure. I think that is the crazy part of it all, is the unpredictable, like, you don't know what tomorrow holds.
Yeah.
And
that's hard for some people. And honestly, I would say that call is not for everyone. If you are really wanting, a stable, predictable life, you're going to get frustrated. And, I think the Lord calls particular people and gives them personality traits, and even marriage, like you gotta know what you're in for. And, I think about this with my sons getting older. I'm like, don't marry a girl that's not gonna want to do like you wouldn't have the same call. Like that's really important, because it's gonna be trouble, later.
See, looking back, I look at my girls now because they did pick those kinds of guys, and I'm like, why couldn't you have found somebody who made money? I'm just saying. Men that were going to help people like we help people. Somebody needs to make money in this family at large, but no, you still have hope. You're just still young.
Maybe. They are just like y'all.
I know, that's my point.
It's awesome to see their family. It's cool for me because their daughters are grown and have kids now, and their family still has the same ethos that I'm guessing it did when y'all were younger. And you invite them into, this is not like my own life. This is, a journey that I'm on, and we're ready for the journey. Not that we always handle it beautifully when it comes, or when it's messy, or when it's uncertain. I think uncertainty is a huge, pillar in being okay with uncertainty instead of bitter about it, But I think that's a huge call. So I would tell people, and we also can't compare ourselves to those other women who do have very stable, predictable lives. We sometimes can't relate, we can't relate to having the same friend at the coffee shop for 20 years. And there's a loss in that too. There's a loss. something that you have to give up, but there is also great adventure
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in the latter.
So I have a question that there's a couple things that came up in that, and so one of them is okay. So I'll use an example. I have there's a family here in Tampa that I know that has, I don't know, some kids, a handful of kids, and kind of missional life, and they live in a really hard neighborhood, which I know many of you have lived in some tough places. We talked a little bit about like relationship to the poor, your son, like, oh, I know all these folks with, these drug addictions and this and that. And so you're contrasting the stable life and the adventurous kind of life. And we're not saying better than, less than, but one thing that does happen, at least what I've seen, is I've seen this particular family. I've seen it with others, but the one I'm thinking of is where they've been heavily criticized. And I'm just curious if this has come up for you all, where and I'm thinking of like Cheryl saying, like, when you're talking about boundaries, like, I don't care what people think. And I think there might need to be a little bit of this going on. So Bree's like, I love this for the kids, having kind of front row seats and knowing what we're living and seeing faith actually embodied. But like, have you gotten from whether family members or friends where it's like almost like, how dare you have those children in that neighborhood, or how dare, yes, I see nods. Let's roll with it. You get the question. Yep.
Yeah, I think before we had kids and we moved into our community, it's not, to be clear, these comments were not, they were coming from just select people. I think we had a lot of people in our corner. We've always had a lot of really supportive people. But I think the comments looked like, oh, okay, you'll move out once you have kids, once you start having kids, right? And then we started having kids, and it was comments like, oh, okay, you'll move once they have to go to school, right? Then they went to school, and it was like, well, once they reach middle school, you'll move out, right? Like, it was just always something, so yeah, lots of comments, lots of questions, always. Yeah.
But you didn't.
No. Yep.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think for us, it was more probably people not understanding versus judging. It was more like, watching the way that our kids were on mission with us and just living the life that we lived. It was more like people couldn't really understand it because like at that time, like when our kids were in their formative years, we were living in Littleton, Colorado, which is, pretty wealthy white, and we kind of lived out in the suburbs, but we always had people living in our home. We always had the kids as friends who were from broken families, were from one parent families, dad's in jail, mom's on drugs, whatever. We always had kids staying in our house, and so I think it was more of a not understanding, like that doesn't seem safe. Like, why are you doing that? Versus judgment.
Yeah, that sounds right. Seems like risky.
Right. Yeah. And I think people can project their own fear onto, why would you do that? What if this happens? And things do happen. Sure. Honestly, they're there's a lot of things that can be negative about that. And we trust the Lord for those things. And, but yeah.
I mean, we made our kids go to public school. And at that time, because we were in ministry, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, they weren't, at church and church school and church camp and church this. They were like thrown to the wolves. So
yeah.
That's why they're
and being able to coach them through that is a huge thing, and to partner with them in ministry and to partner with them with our friends that are hurting. But yeah, there's definitely criticism, I think, but I mean, I don't know. We like to surround ourselves with people who understand the call and are supportive, but you definitely have people that are like, have you thought about that? And
well, it seems like so much of this lifestyle, I've used the image of like trying to go, like if I'm at the airport and everyone's coming down an escalator, if I tried to go up it, everybody would hate me. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like you're going the wrong way, you're in everyone's way. And like there's something about this entire kingdom ecosystem life that is like against the grain of the status quo and kind of the way everything is done, built around security and safety. And you guys are like charting a different course. So it seems an inevitability. Like, we don't understand. That looks really unwise or risky. And you're like, yeah, we're on a journey where it's an adventure. We're going where God's leading us. We want to model this different, but it's an entirely other existence that we're living. So I just feel like, oh, it's an inevitability that you're running into those questions or conversations.
I'd say last, just really quick, I think on that note, for us, it would be more in the financial aspect.
That's the other thing I wanted to talk about.
That we have gotten that, because Hugh's never taken a paycheck our entire married life, and until we lost Ryan a couple years ago, I couldn't work outside the home. I did real estate, but it was, so there was never a stable source of income coming in. So I think for us, the judgment was more, wait, you don't have 501ks and you don't have retirement, like what's going to happen, and that's just been the way that we have lived our whole life. And I'm not going to lie, there have been times when I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, this is so stupid and so hard, and not knowing where the money is going to come from. But the Lord has always provided, never usually on time. Usually he always provides way late. I don't know what's up with that, but he provides, you know what I mean? But that's been our biggest, I think, skepticism and judgment maybe from people around us, is why it's just not wise. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think too, like John, what you're saying about that escalator, I think that's also the call, not just Brave Cities Apostolic, but that's also like the call of Jesus. When we remind ourselves of what are we doing here, we have the enemy that's working against us, so the path is narrow, right? And if you find it, and I think that's always where we should find ourselves. Like, what is everyone doing? Okay, I'm going to do the other thing, and that's not what we're taught. That's not what it's like instilled in us as a child. It's like, we want to look like everyone else. We want to have the same clothes as everyone else. And there's an aspect of that, like, being in the world and being able to relate to it. But I think we're always looking to the margins and trying to see the bigger picture. And I think that is a huge call of, pioneer workers, is thinking about the whole thing, not just the one channel, but how does that channel affect this channel? The whole city building is like the governor or, the mayor of the city, is thinking about the whole thing. They're not just thinking about their one, little area. So I think that's a huge call that not everyone has to take that burden, honestly, to think about the whole thing. But when you think about all of it, then we really should be going the other way. And so, criticism should be expected. And I would expect the enemy, if he's doing his job, to do that, So I'm like, touche, he's doing, we should be doing that. We're fighting we're in a battle here, and we should have opposition. And that is almost a sign that you're doing it,
Externally and internally, right? Like you mentioned, like sometimes in here, we're like, why am I doing this? So stupid.
Right.
All right. So I don't know how y'all are on time. I know we're coming toward the end of our time. I don't want to keep you guys past what we agreed to, but I would like to, maybe we can kind of go around. What I would like to do, I know we've heard from women that listen in on the show, and like, so they enjoy the show, whatever, but this is a unique opportunity to speak to them. And so what I would think is, like, think back, like if you were to give a word to yourself, your young, naive, day one version, as you're entering into this life, whatever, like you're kind of just starting to brave this path. And like, if you could kind of like, I don't know, give yourself a little word from today. And my guess is that there's some listeners that maybe are in that place that are like starting to step out, starting to sniff this out. And like, I don't know, is there something that you would say to your younger self, encourage them in, or a word of advice or wisdom or warning?
There's so many. There's so many. Can I have a couple?
You can have as many as you like.
I won't take very many, but I'll take a couple.
Okay.
A word that I've used for the longest time now is expectations.
Mm.
And I share this with my kids and with younger women and whoever, but not having expectations, period,
So
of yourself, not letting other people have expectations of you. I mean, you could go into so much detail with that, but when you take away the expectations, you take away 90% of the things that can go wrong, the fear, the just all of it, because it's like, what are people expecting of me? And then it gets you, you know, or what am I expecting of that person? And I just found out through our life that so much of the stuff that happens are unmet expectations that you might not have even known were there. You know, like you've disappointed somebody because they expected this of you, but you didn't even know it was there, and vice versa. So that's my big one that I tell my girls all the time, is to not have expectations. And the second one, obviously, is just be authentic, be your real authentic self. And my authentic self is going to look so much different than Lindsey's from both of yours. You know what I mean? My life with raising Ryan and my girls, it just shaped me in a way that makes me different from a lot of other people. And that's just the life that I've led. And like, I look at you and Taylor, and you guys do so much ministry together, and that's amazing. But not every woman who watches this should go, I have to do that or I'm not successful. You know, not everybody should look at my life and go, I have to look like that or I'm not. So it's just for women to realize that the Lord is going to mold your life how he wants to mold your life, and you got to be okay living in it and not trying to compare it or make it anybody else's, but just going, okay. People used to ask us, and this is the last thing I promise, way back when Ryan was just in the worst of the worst, they would just go, why you? Why your family? You know, you guys serve the Lord, you've been in ministry. And I remember one day my answer back, being flippant, because I use inappropriate humor for everything, but it stuck, was like, well, why not me? You know, why not us? Why shouldn't we carry this burden and this journey? Because it's the Lord thought. I mean, again, I disagree with him, but he thought that's the journey that we should have. So we fight about it all the time. But the whole point is whatever that journey he has put you on looks like, instead of why me when the bad shit happens, why not me? And just count it a huge grace that he thinks that we're strong enough to carry that.
Yeah.
Again, I disagree, but he thinks that, so whatever.
Oh, so good. Thank you for sharing all that.
I'm thinking, and try to conceptualize what I'm thinking right now. I don't know the word that really captures, maybe like to be present and to definitely like just take life, you know, and just enjoy the season you're in. I think a lot of time is spent like looking forward, which is part of what we, you know, it's important to have vision. It's important to consider your next steps, but not to live in those, and just to really be where you're at now. In all the seasons, the early seasons, the mid seasons, late seasons are all there for a reason, and to love that. And we spoke kind of about wisdom from, you know, older generations and that kind of stuff. When I was in bedside nursing, if I had a patient over 90 and they were up, I mean, they would be walking around the unit. They didn't want you to do anything for them. And they were just like very sharp and independent and happy and all of those. I would just ask, I'd be like, what's your secret? You know, and like try to like get as much information out of them as I can. And almost all of them would tell me that, you know, just to love life and to love where you're at. And they would also remind me that right now they're like, it's, you know, we're always reflecting back, and, you know, the season you're in right now, it's so chaotic, but it's so wonderful. And you're gonna just look back and, think about how this stage was. And, so I think just to be present and, take it all in where we're at.
Good.
Not to fear. No fear.
Mhm. I think I was just thinking about, and you touched on this, Cheryl, but the importance of really not comparing, right? I think stepping into a journey like this and just family on mission and ministry that looks like this, it's important to pause and ask the Lord what this looks like for you and your family, and to learn and glean from other people, but also know that your journey is going to be really individual, right? That the way that this looks for your family or for yourself is also, it may look different from someone else. And so hopefully people have heard that today from, some of what we've talked about or shared. But I think, again, each of us, our lives look like the same, but also really different, and the way this plays out for our families and the way the Lord has called our families. So I would say that, back to myself in those early years, like, to really seek the Lord on what that looks like. And I think part of what I would, tell myself back then is, some of those early years of ministry, that yes, I would think I would have told myself, yes, you'll experience a lot of pain in this journey for sure, walking alongside people and experiencing this, but also some of my greatest joys would be experienced in this for sure. And so I think I would go back and tell myself for sure, don't back off, like, keep stepping forward in this, because some of the deepest pain and absolutely greatest joy, would be experienced through this. And I'm certain there's more of that to come.
Love it. Thank you.
Good wisdom. I would say something I would tell myself and tell anyone listening, like, it's about the journey and not about the destination. The destination is for God to take care of, but the journey, I think I was always waiting to get to something that I haven't got to yet, so it's just like enjoying the journey. It's about the process. We try to tell our kids that about sports. They're super into athletics, and they'll work so hard. They go to the gym before school, after school. They work so hard, and then they play bad in the game. What I mean? And it's just like, wait, it was all that for the game? And then they did bad, and then they're just crushed. It's like, no, it's got to be about the work you're putting in. It's got to be about the process of all of this, and that makes things better. It's about the fights in the middle of Walmart with the kids, and you're embarrassed, and somebody's like, honey, you got your hands full, and you're like, I don't know. I'm thinking of that I'm embarrassed. Like, it's not always like this, and I did teach them that. They just forgot, the other day, one of our kids, I mean, we talk about the Bible all the time, one of our kids was like, who is Moses again? And I was like, you're like, what? Really? I told them that. Like, they know who Moses is. Don't get the idea that we haven't talked about that. But I think, it's such about the journey of all of it. And I would say with young kids, I would say, tell myself they're only little for 4 years, and then they're never little again. So get through the time, enjoy the time. I always thought that time would never end, probably because I had 5 kids and it did, it does like last long
Lasted
time.
a long time.
But I could never really see, the end of that. But I think it's just a powerful thing to trust the Lord for what He's given you, and everything looks different. There's not a cookie cutter. So I would say, but also, like, pay attention to the voices that you're listening to. I think that's a big thing. Like, what is the Lord actually asking? What is He saying? When you're considering, boundaries and all these things, it can be the Lord, and it often is, but sometimes it's not the Lord. Sometimes you don't need to have it, sometimes you need to have your hands open. And so I think just being sure to filter, like, see, like, is this Jesus saying this, or is this something else? Because I think that saves a lot of trouble, because there's so many voices in the world, especially for women. If you're on social media, you can't do it right. There's, do you do bottles? Do you breastfeed? Do you do this? Do you do this? And I'm like, when I watch that stuff, I'm like, oh, I think I probably did it all wrong. I did it all.
Girls
but
tell me all the time I did it all
you
wrong.
did it wrong. You shouldn't have wore those
No.
jeans with it. There's just so many voices that we have, but we have to align ourselves with the Lord. What is he saying? What is he saying for us? What is he saying in our families? How do we create a stable family that is going to really like impact the world? And it may be, like having fun things. Like we have an RV and that was so fun for us. And I felt like, should we have this? But something that we did was we were like, okay, it's about the journey. So let's have fun on the way to the trip. Let's don't just wait till we get there.
Yep.
Let's have a great time on the journey because we have to make it, and let's enjoy the journey, and be faithful with what we've been given and give our whole lives. I did write down a quote from Elizabeth Elliot that she's very inspiring to me. She said, "This job has been given to me to do, therefore it is a gift, therefore it is a privilege, therefore it is an offering I may make to God. Therefore it is to be done gladly, it is to be done for him, here, not somewhere else, that I may learn God's way. In this job, not in some others, God looks for faithfulness."
I'm so grateful that we had the time to do this. And I guarantee we're going to be asked to do this again sometime. So if this was good with you guys and you would be game one day in the future, I would love to do this again at some point and maybe double click on some of these because there's so many things that emerge. But Linz, where you landed right there with this like journey. And as I've listened to all of your stories, I just want to, literally say thank you to each of you for your, like you've described as you've shared these stories. Some words I jotted down that now I can't find. Like there's like this unpredictable, flexible, risky, adventurous, fun journey that takes, even the language around brave cities, it takes real courage. You've been very courageous women and lived bold, daring lives. And like as I listen to your stories, I'm overwhelmingly impressed and grateful for you. And I'm just grateful for you sharing these stories because more of that, in the world. And like I'm grateful for what you've modeled in your own communities, grateful for your time here sharing. And I hope we can hang again sometime. But I'm really thank you guys so much for your time.
Thanks.
Any final word here? We shut it down.
I have one final word, and that's just, I think sitting here looking at everybody to end like what we were just talking about with our younger self to our older self, authentic community. Like if we didn't have the authentic community that we find ourselves in to do this, I don't think any of us could do it. So without women like you, you know what I mean? I don't think we'd have the strength to do it if we didn't have really authentic friends and community to be on this battlefield with.
I'm so glad you added that. It's you put your finger right on something that maybe we didn't articulate well enough that like could be left to a curse of knowledge. Like we all know, of course, you're running in a tribe, and someone that might listen to this in isolation and be like, no, you gotta have the crew. Thank you for I'm so glad you said that. We did it, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.